Hey guys, this is Comely from LeBlanc here to bring you through the Assassin update for LeBlanc the Deceiver. First, let's take a look at Riot's goals for this rework. They want to make LeBlanc healthier by giving her opponents time to respond when she goes in. By adding a little time between when LeBlanc goes in and when her full burst hits, the choice of whether to snap back to W's origin means LeBlanc has to give up damage. Give LeBlanc unique strategic tools and capabilities so she brings something to her games that other assassins don't. In doing the first two things, emphasize her thematic identity as the Deceiver, emphasize her tricky side. A lot of skills have been changed and move around in her kit to try to accomplish this, so let's dive into it. Right off the bat, her passive is Sigil of Malice. The name and main mechanic come from her former Q. Damaging an enemy with any of her spells will mark them for 4 seconds. After 1.5 seconds, the mark will activate and her next spell on them consumes the mark to deal additional damage to the target. The target then cannot be marked again for 5 seconds. The base damage scales with each level and becomes a very significant portion of her damage output. Right away, we see the 1.5 second delay moving her burst to a more methodical approach. Her Q has been modified and renamed to Shatter Orb. The targeted projectile is the same as the old one, but now rather than applying the sigil that has been moved to the passive, if it is cast on a unit that already has an active mark, it will chain to another nearby active mark and continue bouncing through all active nearby marks. This only deals 70% damage to minions, but still provides the option to wave clear by using W and then waiting the 1.5 seconds for the mark to turn on, and then queuing to do another round of AoE damage, sparing her from having to use W, Alt W just to clear the wave. Distortion is still LeBlanc's W, and the most important change is that there is now a small delay before you can reactivate it to return to your starting location. Mostly this just means that you need to be a little bit more careful about what situations you are diving yourself into, but the delay isn't so long that flying in, slinging some spells will have any more delay before you can get out. Ethereal chains are still her E. If you're unfamiliar, you throw out a chain that deals damage and latches onto the first enemy hit. If you manage to stay within range of the target for 1.5 seconds, they are rooted and take additional damage. There is a quality of life change in that now both LeBlanc and the enemy will see the break range of the chains, which is quite large but remains the same as the current one. Also, it's really important to note that the 1.5 seconds it takes for the chains to activate is the same as the activation time for the passive, meaning that using only the E on the target will do the damage of both your passive and your E if you manage to stay in range and proc the second instance of it. This ends up making it a great source of damage output on individual targets for very little cost. Besides these notes, anyone who has played LeBlanc should be familiar with the spell. LeBlanc's ultimate Mimic has the same core, but the rework brings some important changes to it. You still activate it to cast an empowered version of one of her spells, however it no longer goes purely by the last skill you have cast, but rather now activates on the next spell you cast after pressing R. So for example, if you wanted to cast the ultimate W, you'd press R and then press W, regardless of what skill you had passed before, you would do the empowered W. This adds a lot more flexibility to your ordering and spell priority, but it does take a bit of getting used to if you're familiar with the current system. The previous passive Mirror Image has also been modified and shifted over to the ultimate in 2 different ways. Firstly is that when you mimic a spell, you also summon an illusion that will cast the spell as well. This doesn't do damage, but it just adds confusion for the enemies. Secondly, if you activate the Mimic itself by pressing RR, you can summon an illusion of LeBlanc anywhere on the map. It will then head towards the nearest visible enemy champion and cast a fake version of your most recently cast basic ability and then immediately disappear. You can't control this illusion at all, but it does grant vision, so in a pinch it's a ghetto global blue ward, but it can also go downriver or pop out of a bush you put in and can certainly mess with the enemy team. It has a separate cooldown from the regular usage of the ultimate, displayed by a little circle in the corner of the skill, and you can't cast it while the regular Mimic is on cooldown, so you want to make sure you're using it first if you want to add a little dash of chaos to the situation. So these are the changes to LeBlanc, and once again, these were the goals of the rework. Do you think the changes will accomplish these goals? Let us know in the comments, and be sure to subscribe to the channel for more updates, guides, and content from LeBlanc.